All right, we are late today, but I promise you I'm going to make it worth the wait. First and foremost, Black America has spoken. I have been laughing since yesterday, looking through all of your comments pertaining to Kamala Harris washing greens in her bathtub. So disgusting. We're going to get to some of those comments later to make us laugh a bit. But first, we have to get to this. I came across another explosive revelation pertaining to Kamala Harris's ancestry, and I am not kidding. If after this, the media does not completely stop trying to sell her as a Black woman to us, I'm going to have to participate in one of these CNN-type peaceful protests. That's all I'm saying. So let's just jump right into this and get started. Welcome back to Candace. All right, we're going to go through a lot of this slowly because I want you guys to be able to process this. It's a lot of names, it's a lot of moving parts, and we're going to show you the charts so that you can follow along. So where to begin? Okay. It has long been a conspiracy theory that democracy is really just an illusion, that there's just kind of these forces that are really controlling everything, that presidents and political leaders around the world are really just being bred, essentially, that their background stories are created and then they're just sort of injected into the political scene. Doesn't matter whether or not you believe that or don't believe that. I just wanted to tell you that this is not a new thing. This is not a new conspiracy theory. So I'm now quite obsessed with the curious case of Donald J. Harris, obviously. Kamala notably has an estranged relationship with him. He's said that, she has said that, and we know for a fact that he was a committed communist, and he also married a woman who was similarly a committed communist. That is incredibly relevant, okay? So I decided to obsessively revisit his piece that he wrote, Reflections of a Jamaican Father. And this time I was like, I'm going to fully commit myself to finding out as much as I can about every single line of this piece, particularly, of course, pertaining to his missing mother. That's Beryl, Grandma Beryl, and his grandmother, Iris Finnegan, her great-grandmother that she was posted up with. And so I'm going to pull up this chart now so that you guys can follow along, okay? So we see Donald Harris, and above him, we know that his father is Oscar Joseph Harris, and then we've drawn this line across to Beryl Christie Finnegan, who we just can't seem to find outside of that picture of her next to Kamala Harris, okay? And then, of course, above Oscar Joseph, we are told that his parents are Joseph Alexander and Christiana, Miss Christy Brown. So let's actually start, by the way, in the corner there, we have Iris Allen Finnegan. That's Beryl's mother, okay? That is the one that Kamala is pictured with on her lap. She's a baby. Donald says that he photographed that photo of them sometime in the 60s, shortly after Kamala was born. That is our Iris Finnegan. And I said, I'm going to start with her. I'm going to obsessively read this piece. He writes that she is Iris Nay Finnegan. He writes incredibly affectionately about her. What we know is that Iris was born Ora Iris Allen, okay? It's important for you guys to remember that her maiden name is Allen. But we can't find her anywhere in the Jamaican newspaper archives. Donald tells us in his piece that her ancestry is just completely unknown to him. So he has no idea who this woman, who he alleges, had one of the greatest impacts upon his life. He has no idea where she descends from. We also find it a bit off-putting that he doesn't mention her husband by name. He simply calls him Mr. Christie. That would be his grandfather, just one mention, that Mr. Christie, pardon. And guess what? We also could not find her husband, whose name is Patrick Finnegan, anywhere in the newspapers. It's odd because he tells us that they own a farm. He tells us that together, Iris Allen and her husband, Mr. Christie, who we believe should be Patrick Finnegan, he tells us that they own and operate an entire sugarcane farm. So surely I should be able to locate them in the newspapers, a business section, selling, buying something, but no, I could not. Now, I want to be clear, that doesn't mean that we could not find them at all. These people do exist. I can definitively tell you guys that Iris Finnegan did in fact exist. She just didn't own the farm. She worked it. She was an agricultural laborer, okay? So how do we know that Iris Finnegan was an agricultural laborer and not a farm owner? Because of her son, Noel Pendergast. He listed her as an agricultural laborer on his documents for him to come into the United States because he was coming into work as an agricultural laborer. So I'm showing you those documents. Again, this is her son, Noel Finnegan. And you see it says, "Who is your mother?" He writes down Iris Finnegan, and they ask what her occupation is. And he writes an agricultural laborer. Okay. So that is incredibly strange, I guess. First and foremost, if your parents owned a sugarcane farm, why would you travel to America for agricultural work on someone else's farm? I feel very deeply in my soul that he, and I'm referring now to Donald Harris, doesn't want us to look too far into this. He doesn't want us to know who his true grandfather is. That's why he just refers to him as Mr. Christie. It's likely not Patrick Finnegan. And of course, we should be looking further into why it is that every time we look up any of these people who he is telling us in this piece owned stuff, they owned stuff and operated things, it turns out that they were just workers. We also were able to confirm, I'm just taking you guys jogging memory, that Iris did in fact birth Beryl Finnegan. We found Beryl Finnegan's birth certificate. We know that Iris Allen is in fact her mother because she is correctly listed on that birth certificate. But oddly, we then find that Beryl, too, is listed as just a barmaid on her marriage certificate. Her marriage certificate, by the way, as we determined earlier, to a Lawford Newland, who similarly we saw was traveling into the United States as a laborer looking for work. What is going on here? Does this family have money? Do they not have money? Well, I'll remind you, by the way, that I spoke to Donald Harris's brother, and he told me that all of the kids had businesses that were handed to them by their father, Oscar Harris. That Donald and his two other siblings, were handed businesses. So what's happening here? Again, do they have money? Do they not have money? This is getting confusing. So I decided that it was my duty to help Donald Harris with his genealogy. I wanted to help him determine who exactly Iris Finnegan was and why he doesn't know her ancestry. And I thought that the easiest way to determine it would be to look up some records for sugar plantations, because obviously if you're owning a sugar farm, there just has to be some sort of a record for how you inherited it, right? Because we know these were initially plantations that had slaves, and I'm sorry, you weren't just casually putting together a sugar plantation and not having to have any documents whatsoever. He lists in his piece that she worked on the Thatch sugarcane farm. Strangely, I could not find a record of the Thatch Walk sugarcane farm that he listed. I did, however, find a Thatch Hill sugarcane farm, and that was in the exact same St. Anne parish in Jamaica, but the owner of that farm was listed as an Eliza Brown. Brown. Now, you're going, Brown. Wait, why does that sound familiar to me? What's wrong with that? Because that's the last name of the other side of Donald J. Harris's family. So something doesn't feel right here. Again, let's just pull up that family map again so I can slow this down for you, okay? Donald J. Harris is supposed to be the son of Oscar Joseph Brown Harris. We didn't put Brown there, but Oscar Joseph Brown Harris, because his mother, you see there, is Chrissy Brown, okay? And Beryl Finnegan, Iris's daughter. But now it's starting to look like maybe that Iris Finnegan worked for the Brown Harris side. Like, what's going on here? Weird. But I said, okay, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's just take a closer look at the Brown side of the family, who he acknowledges. Like, we had slaves, like that was a thing. We owned plantations. We established Brownstown. He was very honest about that and forthcoming in his piece. So we're going to take a look at this family tree, and we're going to focus on Christiana Brown. Okay, that's supposed to be Oscar Brown's mother, Miss Chrissy. And Donald has told us actually a lot about her in this piece, but we've only got this one picture. And like I said, every one of these pictures, for me, it just looks like a worker that is wearing her Sunday's best. And I'm not trying to be judgmental. I don't know. That's the way these pictures look to me. And that's not the way that he's presenting it. And like I said, he tells us a lot about Christiana Brown. He tells us that she's a descendant of Hamilton Brown, who's on record as a plantation and a slave owner, the founder of Brownstown. He tells us that it was her, that woman, who sparked his interest in economics and in politics. simply by him observing her and listening to her in her daily routine. Okay, so she was very into politics. He tells us that she owned and operated the popular dry goods store on the busy main street leading away from the famous market in the center of Brownstown. Okay, so she is a store owner, and he says in the piece, every day after school, I would go to her shop to wait for the drive home to Orange Hill after she closed the shop. She never paid much attention to the business of the farm at Orange Hill. Her sons took care of that side of the family business. Her constant focus was on the issues that affected her business of buying and selling imported dry goods, as well as the cost of living, issues that required understanding and keeping up with the news, a task which she pursued with gusto. He goes on to write, there was a daily diet of politics as well. She was a great admirer, okay, this is important, she was a great admirer of Busta, Sir William Alexander Bustamante, the chief minister in the colonial government and leader of the Jamaican Labor Party, the JLP. She claimed with conviction and pride to be, herself, Christiana Brown, a laborite, as the members of the JLP were called, and for the interesting reason that, as she argued, labor is at the heart of everything in life. Little did I know it then, what I learned later in studying economics, that my grandmother was espousing her independently discovered version of a labor theory of value, okay? That's what he says, end quote. I want to show you that guy again, who he says his grandmother idolized, and she loved him because he was a laborite. So I really focused on that. I was like, who is this guy? Who is this Busta, Sir Busta, that she admired? This guy is very important to Jamaican history, to Jamaican politics, past and present. He was a man that was actually born William Alexander Clark, and he would go on to become the first minister of Jamaica. He's an unbelievably shady character, okay? He left Jamaica at the age of 21 to go to Cuba, and then there's no trace of what he did for 30 years. When he came back, he was a trained commie. He was ready to overthrow government establishments by establishing all of these unions, these worker revolutions that could essentially reshape governments, getting people to riot, okay? We call these color revolutions. The American CIA does this all around the world. You think there's like a normal uprising that's taking place in Ukraine, and then you find out like, wait, why is John McCain in the middle of this, getting people to revolt? And then all of a sudden we are establishing someone as the president. That is the idea of a color revolution. So this guy disappears for 30 years, comes back to Jamaica, and all of a sudden he's organizing regular people to riot and to overthrow. And effectively, people do this so that they can establish power for themselves. So the workers, the working class people think that whatever they're saying to them is because they really care. You're not being treated fairly in this factory, and you need to have the minimum wage. It should be higher. You should be making more for your family. Yeah. And next thing you know, they're rioting, they're overthrowing people that are in power, and who they actually place in power are the people that organized it in the first place. It's just a good old-fashioned commie revolution. Something else of interest is that he also, aside from being arrested by the American government once for, doing commie things and staging these sorts of riots, he also called for the genocide of Rastafarians. Look at this headline. This is a headline of somebody going back and revisiting. Bring in all Rastas, dead or alive. Now, if you're American, you don't know much about what a Rastafarian is. You do know who Bob Marley is. Bob Marley is hate Rastafarian. You probably have a depiction probably of just Bob Marley. Like, oh, they smoked pot. Yeah, well, in reality, they were like this religious, socio-political movement of, you had Africans who, after being enslaved, really thought that their enslavement was intentional. Many people who believe this today, that they came from Ethiopia. They were actually incredibly peaceful. They came from Ethiopia, and they felt that they were the people that were being spoken about in the Bible, and that they were intentionally being, like, there was this intentional African diaspora all around the world to remove Black people from their roots. And so these people, this guy, he gets into power, and they actually were incredibly effective in Jamaica in terms of organizing for themselves. They lived in their own encampments, and they also had like agricultural unions. Like they were growing crops and things of their own, and so they were very well established all on their own. And what ended up happening was this guy essentially said that they were dangerous because 6 of them got into trouble. And he said, bring me all of the Rastafarians, dead or alive. And what ended up happening is they started rounding up Rastafarians. I'll actually read you specifically what happened to some of those Rastafarians on his call, because again, he was incredibly powerful. It says on April 12th, Good Friday, Prime Minister Alexander Bustamante, because again, he went on to become the prime minister, ordered the arrest of all Rastafarians that are alive. Police and military forces entered working class neighborhoods and Rastafarian encampments, detaining Rastafarians and forcibly cutting off their dreadlocks. Many Rastafarians were tortured and killed, with estimates suggesting that as many as 150 individuals were detained. So the reason that he ordered for them to even have their dreadlocks forcibly cut off is because it held spiritual meaning for them. Absolutely sick, absolutely disturbing, all of this true, and it's way worse if you look into this guy. I mean, there was like mysterious burnings of all of their crops, particularly when Winston Churchill was visiting. That's another rabbit hole you can jump down, but I wanted to just tell you who this guy was because he makes a note of this in his piece, Donald J. Harris, that Christiana Brown loved this guy. That was her political vision. She loved Bustamante. He just adopted that name, Bustamante, maybe to make it sound like he was a person that was for the people, who knows. So we thought surely this powerful woman, going back to Christiana Brown, who was involved in politics, speaking about politics every day in her dry goods store, and she was so accomplished. She has these stores. She's, like I said, deeply seated, speaking about the Labor Party. She must be mentioned in the newspaper a few times. I mean, there's just no way that we're not going to be able to find her in a newspaper article. And indeed, we did find her. We found her, strangely, as a potential witness to election fraud. Christiana Brown taking the stand in a case pertaining to election fraud. Yes, it is about to get completely crazy, so I hope you guys are following along and this is all making sense so far. Stay with us. We're just going to throw it really quickly to one of our advertisers and get right back. Now, what we are covering is obviously insane here. This election season has been the most insane. We really don't know what is going to happen in November. But there is one thing that I know. I'm definitely still buying gold and silver. The United States has $35 trillion in debt. There is no better time to protect your money and savings while you still can. So go to CandaceLikesGold.com. You'll learn about the top-rated precious metals company, Goldco, and how they can help you. They are a great company that is top-rated with over 6,000 five-star reviews and a whole bunch of awards. Not only do they support my show, but my listeners can get up to a 10% instant match in bonus silver on qualified orders. So if you're worried about your money losing value or you just want to buy some precious metals that you can physically hold on to, Goldco can help. Visit CandaceLikesGold.com. Again, very easy, CandaceLikesGold.com. All right, jumping right back into this. Here is where we found Christiana Brown in the Kingston Gleaner. I am showing you the headline here. Witnesses claim they received money to vote for Mr. Allen. Hey, you remember, Iris Allen, her last name was Allen. Okay, maybe it means something, maybe it doesn't, okay? So I'll tell you a little bit about this case because it's super long because it's actually a transcript, which is incredible that they used to print this in the newspaper, but it was a full transcript of the court case that was happening. And this was an election petition. So in 1944, Christiana Brown was made to testify because there was a political election between a guy named Harold Egbert Allen. Harold Egbert Allen was Busta's protege. He eventually went on to become his finance minister, okay? So he was the person that was running, and obviously you could imagine Busta wanted this guy to get elected. And he was running against a guy named T. Adrian Gray. Well, Harold did, in fact, win the election. And remember, Christina, according to Donald J. Harris, was allegedly obsessed with Busta. So surely I'm thinking she must have been very happy that the Labor Party protege, Busta's protege, won. Well, that's where it gets interesting because she was testifying because she apparently had witnessed some guy named S.P. Nugent paying her niece to vote for Allen. So it became this massive scandal because they were quite literally paying people to vote for Allen to get him into office. And so she told the truth to the police officer. She told the truth on the stand. And she just told them, yeah, I witnessed this exchanging of money. Her niece denied it. But I just think that that's quite strange because shouldn't she be happy with this outcome? I'm going, what's happening here? She's on the team of labor. She was devoting her life to speaking about this in her dry goods store. But then buried in this article is an explosive detail in the midst of all the testimony. When the judge asks her, Christiana Brown, what do you do for a living? She answers, "I'm a washerwoman." I said, "What's a washerwoman?" A washerwoman is a woman who quite literally washes, just what it sounds like, just that simple. It means that her job was to wash the clothes and the sheets and to hang them out to dry. Now let's again bring up that photo of Miss Chrissy that Donald shares, okay? Sitting outside, like I said, looks to me like a woman who's wearing her Sunday best, potentially for a picture. I never felt that this was a woman who was running a dry goods store and had an active life in politics. I rather did feel that we were missing something here. Why would Christiana Brown, in this case, tell the judge that she was a washerwoman? Maybe it's because Donald is lying about everything. I want to be very clear here. I believe that Donald did know Christiana Brown, the washerwoman. I believe that Donald J. Harris did know Iris Finnegan, the agricultural laborer, and her daughter, Beryl, but I do not believe that they were his kin. I believe they worked for his kin. So what does that mean? Well, it means that it's likely that whoever Christiana worked for, whoever's laundry it was that she was washing, were very politically inclined based upon the questions that were being asked of her in that examination. Again, we'll include a link for this on Locals. You can read this yourself. But the questions that they're asking her, and it applies to me that clearly wherever she is working, there's a lot of political action happening around her. And if her niece was given money to vote for Alan, it was likely because Alan's political team knew that they worked for a family, that her niece worked for a family that supported Alan, right? You wouldn't go around with cash, giving it to these low-level workers on a farm if you weren't sure the people who were running this farm were friendly to your campaign. So that made me go, okay, that name, the last name Allen is at least familiar. I now know that he's connected to Bustamante. I now know that Donald is lying about even Christiana Harris. That's every single relative that they have presented a picture of. They are lying about what they do, and we have documentation of the fact that they are lying about what they do, that these were workers, and they effectively stole their identities and turned them into someone else. So I thought, let me look into this guy who was running, this Harold Egbert Allen, Bustamante's protege, so to speak, that had agents that were going around trying to rig an election with cash, allegedly. Allegedly. I didn't actually see what the conclusion of the case was, but I'm going to guess, given the amount of power that Bustamante had, that he won the election and that the case was just shut down. So again, I'm going to show you this guy again, this Bustamante guy. I started looking into him, and there's some curious facts that came up. Curiously enough, he was married to a woman who came to be known as Lady Idris Allen. Idris Allen. Now, this is pure speculation, but in my head, I'm just taking you through my thought process. I was like, that sounds like Iris Allen, but it's Idris Allen. Okay, whatever, but like that's who he's married to. And then I sort of came to the conclusion that actually that Idris Allen, you can show a picture of her again, I think she's the real person who raised Donald Harris. I believe that she is actually potentially Donald Harris's true mother. And it's why she doesn't speak about Beryl and he won't speak about his mother, because I think that is his mother, and I'm going to tell you why. Idris Allen began her career as a clerk working at a dry goods store called Sherlock and Smith. She soon began working at a department supervisor of another dry goods store, Nathan & Co. Limited, and she worked and operated that store for 10 years. And of course, don't even get me started, she was steep in labor right politics because look who she eventually married. They stayed married for 10 years, or a little more than 10 years. They got married in 1941, and then he literally, it says, died suddenly in 1953. So they were married for 12 years. She fought extensively for social welfare programs, otherwise known as hand your kids to the state. She was a good commie. And let me tell you what's interesting about that. You see, I noticed this thing that it tends to be the people that fight the hardest for social welfare programs. When you look into their families, it turns out that they were the ones that owned the slaves. Why do you think it would be that the people that owned the slaves and clearly did not believe in social welfare suddenly became the most vigorous, loudest voices for social equality? These were the people that were establishing the unions. Does that make sense to you? You have to actually think like a slave owner for a second, right? So you're a slave owner, you're running a plantation, business is good. Like you are the boss of everything, okay? It's like, yep, don't care what's happening to the slaves, whipping slaves, turning out profit. And then suddenly the government says no more slavery. We're going to pay you for your slaves like they did for the descendants of Hamilton Brown. We know that Kamala's family got what would effectively have been $11 million for their slaves. The British government did pay them for their slaves in Jamaica, okay? But you're not just going to be like cool with having lost all of your power. You're going to organize and figure out how to maintain your power again. You don't just go, oh, well, now I love you. I know yesterday we were whipping you, but now I love you, slave. That doesn't make sense, okay? So slavery gets abolished, and in about 1883, the UK abolishes slavery. Or I guess the British Empire abolishes slavery, and that means Jamaica, and that's why they've got to release their slaves, and most of the slaves stay on. Like my grandparents' descendants stayed on and became like sharecroppers. They just worked the farms because they didn't really know what to do with their lives. And then those slave owners got together and started planning, like, how do we just re-enslave them in a different way? And that tool to re-enslave them is government. You get your family involved in politics, and then you tell those former slaves that you're fighting for their freedom. And all they have to do is keep fighting for more governance. What is more governance? It's slavery. It's slavery. But you dress it up as freedom. You know, you're like, oh, social welfare programs. Like, we're going to have your kids. We're going to raise your kids. We're going to do this. We're going to offer you free handouts. And suddenly the next thing you know, you're being taxed into oblivion. And all of your money, all of your earnings, you think you're working and you're independent, but your earnings are actually going to the very same people that enslaved you. So yes, I find it interesting that Idris got so involved. The descendant of wealthy slave owners from Barbados got so involved in labor politics and was really cared about social politics, wanted to make sure about the social welfare of people was okay. What does that sound like to you? This is what it sounds like to me. And then you have Mr. Christie still, who knows? I have no idea, still don't know why we're referring to a Mr. Christie in this piece. I have no idea who it is. But what we do learn about Harold Allen, which I found interesting, so Idris's husband, is that he was also the headmaster of Titchfield Upper School. Now, if you remember a couple of episodes, I told you that the first time we can find a trace of Donald J. Harris, it's at Titchfield Upper School. He's listed, he's like 17 years old, and he's listed there. It's just a school photo, and his name happens to pop up as a 17-year-old. Otherwise, it's been very difficult to find anything on him. Do you guys understand like what I am piecing together here? It is my view today that Kamala Harris descends from a long line of wealthy slave owners who then turned into communist leaders with the explicit goal of overthrowing countries and overriding people's independent freedom under the guise of offering them more freedom, more handouts. This seems to be the picture that we are painting on both sides of her family. Her mother came from a wealthy Indian communist family, okay? Now we know, or I have a suspicion, that her father as well came from a wealthy family of slave owners. I do believe that this is his true mother, not Beryl. And I'm going to, again, now show you a different chart. This is just me putting together what I think the true family tree is. And obviously, this is going to take a lot more investigation, but I don't know about Shamala Goplin yet. I'm still investigating her. I'm really sticking with Donald Harris yet because I haven't felt like we've answered all the questions. And the Lady Idris Allen thing opened up a huge door. But I think these are his parents. I believe Lady Idris Allen, who allegedly had no children at all, and you can see she lived a very long life. And he describes, the women who raised him lived a long life and says, oh, she died and it was very hard for me and blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, Lady Idris Allen, if I'm correct, and that is his mother, that would be a massive secret. And it would be a massive secret we're hiding because it would mean that she essentially descends from communist slave-owning royalty who intentionally divided people and moved them across into different countries and put them into powerful positions. Now, again, this is my conclusion based on what I am seeing. There is just no way. There is no way, okay? If there was a way, I would buy a lottery ticket, that all three of the relatives that they listed, Christiana Brown, Beryl, and Miss Iris, that all three we can find records of, but we find them records as workers and not the owners that they allege that they were. Unless this is a case of stolen identity, unless we are looking at something that is so diabolical and sick that they stole the identity of all of them because they needed to create a family tree that would obscure Kamala's true heritage. And the lack of reaction, the lack of an explanation that we are getting, knowing that there are millions of people watching this series, leads me to believe that they are hiding this truth. Also, now suddenly the trail has gone cold of me speaking with Donald Harris's brother. Again, I sense that he was being honest in saying that he did not know. Don't forget, his own brother does not know who his mother is. He says Donald Harris is exceedingly private about that. Why on earth would you need to be exceedingly private about who your mother was? Unless she was someone who was very powerful, who was very connected, and someone who was very involved in politics, unless she was someone who was in support of a man who was rounding up and calling for the extermination of Rastafarians. And you needed the public to believe, despite having that in your line, yes, let's exterminate the Rastafarians. You were going to be so sick and twisted as to sell to the American public that this woman was the first black president of black female president of the United States. Yeah, you'd want to cover that up. So I have a lot of questions here, and I think like I said, it is very likely that Donald Harris actually knew these people because according to just what I've been able to research, and I've been researching this all day, his mother, or who I believe could be his mother, Idris Allen, was very, very busy. By all accounts, she traveled a lot. And so he would have been raised and had meaningful relationships with the help on hand. So he's just pretty much merging his memories. This is my mom. She did actually own a dry goods store. She's in and out. She's traveling with politics. She's in the Barbados Islands. She's here and she's there. And then I'm plausibly being raised by Miss Iris, right? Plausibly being shown things by whoever he is fading that memory in with Christiana Brown, the laundress. He's plausibly around these people while his mom is traveling. And that, again, would explain why Donald Harris has been so private about his mother. All right, guys, I'm going to take a quick break here before we then speak about some other things Kamala Harris has said. Here's some exciting news. We just launched our new store on Sticker Mule. It's packed with awesome Candace Owens merch, including stickers, t-shirts, and more. So head to stickermule.com/Candace and check it out now. A big portion of the sales goes directly to the Candace Owens Show, supporting our mission to empower communities and promote free thought. So whether you want to show your support or just grab some cool gear, we have got you covered. Once again, you can head to stickermule.com/Candace. Go head to it right now. All right, so that is my theory that Kamala was raised by militant Marxists who explicitly wanted to gain power in government. It's a terrifying theory. It means that woman should not, she's way too close right now to the White House. And it is not a person that you want in control of this country because there is, if that is proven correct, likely an entire network of people that she is working with worldwide. No question about it. And it is only going to lead to us having less independence and control over our independent lives. It is certainly a far cry from her story about growing up middle class. This is something that she just keeps saying. Take a listen.
And I come from the middle class. Look, my mother raised my sister and me. She worked hard. She saved up. By the time I was a teenager, she was able to buy our first home. And, you know, home ownership for too many people in our country now is elusive, you know.
She's just so fake. Take another listen to her saying that again.
I believe we need to grow our middle class and make sure our economy works for everyone, for people like the people in the neighborhood where I grew up and the hardworking Americans I meet every day across our nation.
Trained little commie. Okay, so it's been brought to my attention, by the way, that Kamala Harris, during her formative years, lived in Canada in an exceedingly wealthy community, okay? Like a very wealthy community. Kamala did move to Canada at the age of 11 or 12 years old, and she graduated from Westmount High School in 1981. and the public school is in the wealthiest suburb of Montreal. She attended Vernier College in Montreal, and then she moved to Howard University in Washington, D.C. And even when the New York Times was looking into Kamala Harris and describing her upbringing, they wrote this: eventually, the family settled on the top floor of a spacious Victorian home in an affluent neighborhood bordering Westmount on Grosvenor Avenue, one of Canada's wealthiest districts. It was a comfortable home with high ceilings, hardwood floors, Persian carpets, recalled Miss Kagan, who first met Miss Harris in 8th grade and lived with her family for a time to escape an abusive stepfather. So Kamala Harris comes from money. And that makes perfect sense given who her mother was and who her father was. And they're trying to obscure this fact again because they want people to think that she has some struggle in her, and she doesn't, okay? She simply does not. Even when this guy, Trevor Williams, who was a former basketball player on the Canadian Olympic team, who dated her sister, Maya Harris, in high school, was speaking to the New York Times. He recalled that the Harris sisters played down their affluence. He said, quote, "I didn't even realize at the time that their mother was this high-powered doctor." Yeah, she was, because she had a lot of money and she had a lot of connections, and because communists stay connected with one another all around the world, and they were interested again in achieving a type of enslavement over people under the guise of freedom. So it really is incredible to revisit that book. The book is driving me crazy now, the truths that we hold, right? Because she speaks about moving to Canada, and she writes this: "I was happy just where I was, but when I was in middle school, we had to leave. My mother was offered a unique opportunity in Montreal, teaching at McGill University and conducting research at the Jewish General Hospital. It was an exciting step in advancing her career. It was not, however, an exciting opportunity for me. I was 12 years old, and the thought of moving away from sunny California in February in the middle of the school year to a French-speaking foreign city covered in 12 feet of snow was distressing, to say the least. My mother tried to make it sound like an adventure, taking us to buy our first down jackets and mittens as though we were going to be explorers of the great northern winter. But it was hard for me to see it that way. It was made worse when my mother told us that she wanted us to learn the language. So she was enrolling us in a neighborhood school for native French speakers, Notre Dame des Neiges, Our Lady of Snows. It was a difficult transition, since the only French I knew was from my ballet classes, where Madame Bovie, my ballet teacher, would shout, demi-plie, plie, and up. And I used to joke that I felt like a duck. Okay, so here's the thing. If you attended ballet classes before you got to Canada, you were not having this middle-class existence. I mean, it is just such a nonsense. Do you know how expensive ballet is, okay? I just put my daughter in ballet classes, and when I looked at the price, I was like, what am I doing? She's 2 years old. Like, she's running around the class, going like this, doing nothing, and I'm putting her into these ballet classes, really because I just think she looks extremely cute in this little ballet outfit with her top bun. But it's expensive with one daughter. They had two, okay? 2 daughters in ballet class when she was living in California. We need to stop with this narrative that Kamala Harris grew up middle class. It's so offensive to me. I just can't stand it anymore. If another person says it, I'm going to be sick. I think I'm going to be physically ill if we keep pretending that she is one of 2 things. 1, middle class, and 2, black. We just have to stop doing both of those things immediately. Amazingly, she says that she took her hard upbringing in the Albert ballet classes with her. She says, this is a quote, "I was sure to take my upbringing with me to Montreal. One day, Maya and I held a demonstration in front of our building, protesting the fact that kids weren't allowed to play soccer on the lawn. I'm happy to report that our demands were met." Like, I mean, that is just definitively a made-up story. It's just a made-up story. There's no element of that story that is true. Like, you did not demonstrate to play soccer in a lawn in a brand new place in Montreal, Canada. I mean, how many months can you even play soccer up there? Weren't you just telling us that it was so cold and you had to buy your down jackets and you were sad to say au revoir to your French ballet teacher? What's going on? None of this makes any sense. This book is a treasure trove of bullshit. I am telling you. She then says, eventually I convinced my mother to let me switch to a fine art school where I tried out violin, French horn, and kettle drum alongside my studies in history and math. One year we performed Free to Be, You and Me, from start to finish. I think I'm going to be ill. I think I'm going to be physically ill. But first, I'm going to tell you about American financing because mortgage interest rates are dropping and are now in the fours. If you've been waiting to figure out how to get your finances in order, you need to call my friends at American Financing today because many hardworking Americans are carrying high credit card balances that charge 20% or more each month. It's time to get rid of those. American Financing salary-based mortgage consultants are helping homeowners just like you tap into their home's equity to get out of high-interest debt. They're saving their average customer $800 a month by doing this. With the rates dropping, the decision is so easy. All it takes is a 10-minute, no-cost, no obligation phone call to find out how much you can save. And if you start today, you may be able to delay 2 mortgage payments. So call American Financing today at 800-795-1210. Again, that's 800-795-1210. Or you can visit americanfinancing.net/Owens. Again, that's americanfinancing.net/Owens. Okay. I have to just read, by the way, before we get out of here, I just need to read some of the comments on yesterday's episode because I was just laughing so hard late into the night, realizing Black people are hilarious because they're not trying to be funny and they've just hyper-focused on one thing and they need to talk about it and get it off their chest. And yesterday I was just going through the absurdity of all of her stories in this book, The Truths We Hold, like just trying to Blackify herself. Like I personally think she holds contempt for Black people. Now that I'm digging into her story and realizing like what her family roots are, I believe her contempt is what she thinks Black people are stupid and she can just make up something about her background and we'll go for it. And so the collard greens in the bathtub, very disgusting, obviously, just common sense, absolutely disgusting. Where you shower, got hair, skin, I don't know what else is in people's showers, what gets caught in the drain. You don't just drop food in there. It's just not a thing that you should do. And it's obvious that if it's a thing that you do, it's just not going to be a thing that a Black person does. This is honestly, we're getting now into like basic science, right? So Black people do not do these things. So these are some comments from yesterday's episode that I wanted to read. Marie writes, Black people don't wash greens in the bathtub. Not only is that disgusting, it's insulting. I am Tamaya writes, been Black American all my life and never seen anybody cook greens in the bathtub. Les McKenzie writes, someone should have asked her how they cooked collard greens in her house. Who the hell watches collard greens in a bathtub? Bon Wolf writes, I'm an older woman from the country. Back in the day, we called the large containers used for cleaning greens tubs. No one used a bathtub to clean their greens. Not knowing this detail is where she messed up the lie. She is full of crap. Proctor writes, nobody Black is washing collard greens in the tub. Nobody. Leonard writes, how does a Hindu Indian woman raise 2 proud Black girls? That's in response to her sitting down with Matt Barnes and being like, my mother raised 2 proud Black girls. Literally, how? The math isn't mathing, Kamala. How does that work? Can anybody do that? Can anybody just raise 2 proud Black girls? I just don't get it. Cecilia writes, very interestingly, I am an Indian still living in India. Kamala's mother was an Iyer Brahmin, an upper caste who are very, very prejudiced, and Blacks don't stand a chance. To suggest that her mother raised her and her sister to be 2 proud Black women in white America is really awkward. Yes, as I said, I want to do like an entire week dedicated to Kamala's mother. I might even do an entire week dedicated to Doug Emhoff. I should, but he hasn't said anything about Janet Jackson. I'm sure right now he's just like, you know what? I love Janet Jackson. I'm not going to say anything about Janet Jackson. Doug is probably realizing right now to just stay away from the topic of Janet Jackson altogether. And Kamala probably wishes she did. I feel like maybe Michelle Obama called and was just like, girl, did you really have to go for Janet Jackson? And she was like, I didn't know. I didn't actually grow up with any of his music that I said I grew up with. But we're here and I'm going to keep going. And I know that there was a lot that's happening. Also, that woman that I highly suspect is Donald Harris's real mother that he's hiding and merging all of these stories with, or I guess she could be a grandmother, but no, I think it's actually his mother because of the timeline of when she's born in 1909 and he is then born in 1938. I very much believe that the more that we look into her, we will be able to sort of establish this network of people who I believe are working on behalf of Bustamante and other people who have very shady backgrounds and just appeared in countries and began overthrowing things under the guise of freedom. And I just really want to illustrate here. This makes Kamala Harris exceedingly dangerous. I don't quite think people understand what we are dealing with here. If you have a woman who has a grandparent or a great-grandparent who was tight with Bustamante, who was rounding up Rastafarians and cutting their dreads off and killing and torturing them and calling for a genocide of them, who can just not have any guilt, even slight guilt about that and just pull out a black card and just be like, yeah, like I'm going to be the first black president, and talking about her heritage in Harlem. Like, someone who's capable of that just feels nothing in their soul is not a person that you want to give more power to. So I am calling on Kamala Harris and her team to simply answer these questions. I'm calling upon them. I think that we have produced enough evidence here that something is not adding up, that this is now legitimately substantiated, that there are a lot of holes in their official legend that they tried to establish for the public back in 2019. I think it would be the correct thing to respond to it meaningfully, to tell us where to look so that we can make sense of your background. Maybe there is really just a double barrel Christiana and another Iris who really did live the lives that you say that they lived, who happen to have the same names of the workers who worked exactly where they worked. Maybe there is. I'm open to that, like, 2% possibility. And again, I'm not doing this because I am trying to, like, say that she doesn't have a right to respond to it. I'm doing this because this investigation is important to understanding who it is who is asking for more power in America. That it is the most relevant thing. And yes, this began with something very simple, Janet Jackson, but now we are somewhere so far beyond that every single person should be interested, because as I said, if you have it within you to take the identity of Black people who were washing your clothes, right? Dealing with your plantation, your sugar plantation, which means they were descendants of the slaves that you owned. And you felt nothing when you stole their identity to create a story about yourself so that other Black people would be enslaved by you in a different country. You are disturbed and dismissed as far as I'm concerned. I welcome her to come on the show. I welcome her to have a phone call. I welcome her to do whatever she wants. Any Harris person would like to clarify some things. I'm an open book. I'm open to changing and modifying anything that I've gotten wrong. We are investigating, and I'm starting to draw some conclusions here, but it is still an investigation, and I'm open to hearing any place where we've gotten things wrong. So guys, unfortunately, next week I am going to be on vacation. Not unfortunately, I'm actually really thrilled to go on vacation, but it's unfortunate that we're going to have to stop this investigation. Don't worry, I will still have content for you. So if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to hit the little bell that will tell you the episodes will be just interviews that we have done. Actually, incredibly, on Monday, do not miss Monday's episode. You remember the plane MH370 that just disappeared? Do you ever wonder, like, what happened to that plane? Because I sat down with someone who presented a very solid theory of what happened to that plane. Like, literally make sure you hit notifications on YouTube and that you take a listen, because it blew my mind, but also somewhere in my soul, I just knew that it was right. Like, the government has just been, like, hiding technology from us, hiding truths from us, spiritual truths about us, like where we come from, everything. And it just, like, it blew my mind. If you're someone who can open your mind and expand your mind to the possibility that your government is lying to you about a lot because they've been caught lying to you about a lot, then you need to be here on Monday. But we will have episodes premiering Monday through Thursday next week while I'm on vacation. And I will take the time while I'm on vacation to deeply research Idris Allen and the rest of the family to put the pieces together, because I do believe that this is the thing that they are hiding. Please take the time to go to Locals. We will put up these charts that we showed today, and support the show in whatever capacity that you can. Like, while you're there, just give. You can give $1 a month, whatever it is. It keeps us free, so we don't have to worry about YouTube demonetizing us as they already have. That's all that we have for you today. We will see you next week, even though I will not be here in the flesh. Send me anything you find, info@candace.com. We'll see you guys then.